What's up, guys? First video on the second channel. I assume most people seeing this will just be people that are already subbed to me from over there. So as per usual, I really appreciate you guys. You've been awesome showing up on all my videos, commenting, liking, and just showing support. Such a small YouTuber, so truly grateful from the bottom of my heart. And any new people, like I said, it's my second channel. Over on the main, I have a lot of more edited critiques and reviews of certain aspects of other games. It's mostly Call of Duty right now, but it is going to evolve. So, but yeah, what are my thoughts on Battlefield 6? So, obviously, based on the title and thumbnail, we have to be skeptical, guys. Not to be too cynical, but we have to be. You can't be too fooled yet, because obviously none of us, other than the YouTubers, have had a chance to touch this game. And a few years ago, 4 years ago, when Battlefield 2042 was about to come out, I think there was definitely some excitement leading up. Now, something that is positive is that now that we're seeing the raw gameplay, there is still excitement. Whereas when we first saw 2042 with that beta, everyone was kind of losing their minds. And for me personally, I wasn't really losing my mind that much at the time. I, was kind of in a honeymoon phase, kind of thought the game was all right, but I did not really play the game much after the first month. And the same thing with Battlefield 5. I mean, Battlefield has really gone the route of a lot of other AAA FPSs in recent years, giving us less content, just going more of a silly route, the hero shooters with the operators that were obviously super cringy in Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 really, in a lot of ways, didn't even feel like Battlefield. Just the graphics kind of sucked, it was super cartoony. Just nothing in the game really worked, and the map sucked. So we're just really hoping to move past that point. But today I kind of just want to talk about why we need to be cynical still, and they really do need to earn back our trust, because at this point, you should not have faith in them just off of some basic gameplay. But I do believe, based off of what has been seen, there is reason to be hopeful. Because so far, what I've seen from this gameplay is, it does look quite a bit like Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. It kind of has that little bit of tintish to it like Battlefield 3 has. I've been more impressed by the user interface. That's something so niche that most people will be like, well, why are you complaining about that? But I feel like something that is important for this game to kind of get that taste of 2042 out of our mouth is to just have it not look like it at all. And at least from some of that labs gameplay that leaked, it seems like they've changed it a little bit, which obviously I just appreciate it. That game to me was the biggest disappointment of any game that I've ever played. I bought a PS5 to play it, and obviously it just didn't really pan out. But so far, the game, it looks great. The maps look awesome. There's, the one map, if you've seen the gameplay, the one that's up in the mountains, that kind of reminds me of Altai Range. I think that's the name of it from Battlefield 4. It looks really good. We see 9 maps, which is awesome. I mean, one of them is a remake of a map that I think is a little bit overrated. Firestorm's a little bit more of a vehicle-centered map. I'm more of an infantry player, but, I'll still take it. Hoping to see Downward Peak some point from Battlefield 3. But something that's awesome about the beta is that the third weekend, I believe, not like the early one where, people with the codes get to play, but and not even the second weekend that'll be open to everyone, but the last weekend, all 9 maps will be available in the beta. So that is just awesome to hear, because the beta for 2042, it was just that one rocket map, not a really good map at all. And so something else about the maps that I have noticed that I have really liked is those Battlefield 2042 maps were just so empty. I mean, they were so wide open. They were so huge. Obviously, they were centered around 128 players. I am not currently aware of how many players are going to be in these maps, and I really hope it is not centered around 128 players, because it was just kind of a giant clusterfuck, and really hoping to avoid that. But it seems like a lot of these maps, something that I'm liking that I'm seeing so far is, it is reminding me of Battlefield 3 with the close quarters, urban environments, fighting on the streets. And I've seen that with a lot of the maps, and I do like that. And I think that helps with just the variety of a lot of the other game modes, because a game like Battlefield 4, for example, which I do enjoy, it is kind of a conquest-centered only type of game. less like Battlefield 3, and why I much prefer Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4 is because not only are the maps good for Conquest, but they're also good for Rush, which is personally my favorite mode in the Battlefield franchise. You know, I don't always love the pure chaos of 32v32s. Sometimes I just want a more, concentrated game mode that's fast-paced, but not just people all over the map and, vehicles being, the main centerpiece of everything that's going on. Rush, to me, is just like a better version of Demolition from Call of Duty, and I've always loved advancing along in the map, like in Down Von Peak. It is just, to me, no pun intended, peak in gaming and peak of Battlefield. So I really do hope that that is the approach that they're taking with the maps in Battlefield 6. Something that I have seen is that skill-based matchmaking, the thing that everyone talks about these days, is supposed to be in the game. But I've also seen that the server browser is supposed to be in the game. And so the way that I would imagine something like that working is kind of like the quick match. I don't know how many people actually use it. I assume the more casual type of player would just hit quick match and get loaded up into a game. And so if there is skill-based matchmaking there, I do think that is a good kind of compromise, because, more veteran players like me are obviously just going to be using the server browser to get into whatever maps or lobbies that I like, based on if it's just normal or hardcore, how many people are in it, whatever. So I do think with the server browser, it'll kind of help mitigate the problems, if you do not really like the skill-based matchmaking. But it's just overall so far, I am just really, really surprised, because I just didn't expect to even be remotely impressed. And I get everyone's going to be like, of course you're impressed. Everyone is impressed. This is how it goes every single time. But, that's just not really how I am. I'm definitely a critical person. I'm not like overly critical where I complain about everything. I love to give things their due props. I love to look into stuff that I enjoy or, I don't enjoy, and I love to give my thoughts on the stuff. And where I had been excited about 2042, not so much Battlefield 5, because it looked just like Battlefield 1, I was like, this is going to get old fast. Battlefield 6 is just really, really impressing me with how it looks, and I do have a decent amount of hope at this point that this game will turn out. And probably the centerpiece of that is that Vince Zampella, who I'm sure you guys know of because I've talked about him in my other videos. I obviously made a video about him and Jason West and how he was the man that made COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2 and the old Call of Duties. He was handed over the keys of this franchise, and I can't really think of anyone better to make an FPS game, to fix an FPS game. And so I definitely think that EA was very smart in that move to hand over their most successful shooter game. It might be their most successful game. I don't know. Madden is obviously still huge. But I just think with him in charge, I think the only thing that could possibly hinder him from making a good game is however much EA hinders him. Whatever they try to tell him to do or whatever to insert into the game, that's what's going to hold this game back. It's not going to be him. Every game that he has ever made does all of the small details incredibly correctly. It's just everything about the game makes it complete, whether you look at like COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2 with all the amazing voice acting and the maps and just the perks and just how much content overall is in the game and the uniqueness of all the environments. It's just, this guy really understands what it takes to immerse players. And so I'm glad to see him working on this franchise that, frankly, I care more about this franchise now than Call of Duty. I don't see Call of Duty ever making a comeback, but I do have higher hopes for Battlefield. Battlefield is a franchise that, especially recently, I have really had a yearn for, because anyone that plays on Steam, on PC, would know that these games have been going on, really drastic sales in the last few months. I bought Battlefield 1 for, I think, $2 with all the DLC. You're seeing some gameplay probably right now of it. And just a great, great, great game. In my opinion, Battlefield 1 is the last great FPS game that has come out. I may be missing some other games that I'm not familiar with, so I'm sorry if I am, but at least in my world, this is like the last quality game, FPS game, that has come out. And so it has just been way too long for me to be able to enjoy a awesome Battlefield game. And I would just personally love to see 6 try to be as much as Battlefield 3 as possible, because to me, that is the second greatest FPS game ever made behind Modern Warfare 2. It was the first time that I quit playing Call of Duty in a year because Modern Warfare 3 just simply was not doing it for me, but that game did. And I think that game should be more of the model rather than Battlefield 4, because I do think in basically every single way Battlefield 3 is a better game than Battlefield 4. Not trying to ruffle any feathers if there are any, hardcore BF4 fans in here, if anyone watches this video at all. But it's just the problem with 4 was the vehicle spam. There's just way too many vehicles in the map. The respawning of them is way too fast. And it just seemed like any infantry player was going to get their ass kicked, especially against any high-level vehicle player, because, the thermal on the tanks and just all the vehicles in the boats, it just was not a great experience. I should not have to feel like I have to run engineer at all points in the map. So I just hope that they, kind of make it more like Battlefield 1, because while the vehicles are good, and you can see in my gameplay that they are good, there's a definite slowdown to the speed of the tanks, and maybe that's just because of the setting, but it basically allows you to be strong and to dominate an area without dominating all the areas. And you definitely have to play it passive in order to do well, kind of keep back, because you can get swarmed by players very quickly, whereas Battlefield 4, it just feels like you can fly in and out and dominate all corners of the map with vehicles. So I really hope they avoid that. I think my biggest concerns with Battlefield 6 so far would be when you're paying attention to the weapons and how they shoot. Anyone that's played these older Battlefields know that the guns had a little bit more kick. They kind of started taking it away in 2042. It kind of looks a lot more like Call of Duty, and I would say, I know that's probably a small thing, and I don't think it would ruin the game for me. I do believe that so far from what I've seen, the guns just need a little bit more of that jump. Something that I just always liked more about Battlefield, and they've kind of reduced it each consecutive year, is just the jump on the guns, and it is a little bit more difficult to aim, but that challenge is just a part of what makes the game a little bit more realistic. No, I'm never going to be the guy that sits here and calls these games realistic, because they're just not, and that's just a little bit delusional to say they are, but it's just something that I like. It's just a part of the skill gap for getting into the games, and so I would just like to see that jump come back. And I would say my other really big concern about Battlefield 6 is the expanded content, because with this free DLC approach that really it seems like most games are taking nowadays, it just seems like we're getting less and less and less. And straightforward, I would just rather pay $60 for 16 maps. I mean, that's just how it is. I would split the player base, whatever. If you just want to do $60 and then give them away for free in a year, you wouldn't hear any complaints from me. Because the simple fact is, I don't think this game is going to survive with 3 or 4 maps a year. I just don't think it's good for the long term of the game. I mean, what did 2042 get, like 5 or 6 maps throughout its whole life cycle? I know Battlefield 5 only ended with 20 maps, whereas a lot of the other Battlefield games would end with over 30. So it's just something that I hope they avoid, and I hope we get more weapons rather than just 1 or 2 a season. I mean, I remember still thinking at a point I would return to 2042 when there was more content, and I paid attention to, the drops, the new season, which took forever, and they were like, oh, here's like 3 weapons and 1 new map, and at that point I was like, all right, I have no point of coming back to this. And it's kind of happened with Delta Force too, because Delta Force is a pretty solid game. I'm not really a big fan of the operators. I just think they look a little bit out of place, but the gunplay and, the real gun names and everything, those are solid. The maps are kind of so-so. But it's just like the same thing where it's 1 new map a season. I mean, it's not even 2. I mean, 4 new maps in a year, it's just not good for sustaining a game, for sustaining a player base. And so I just hope that they can avoid that. But yeah, guys, overall, I would just say, be excited. Like, be excited, but don't just be so quick to throw them your money, right? They need to earn our trust back. you know, as players, we have to have a voice, because when we just start throwing out money and being so quick to buy stuff, that's really when we lose our voice and our power. You know, that's the only power that we have as consumers, and we just can't be so quick. The success of Battlefield is good for us as a whole, because anytime a new good game comes out and it keeps driving the industry and breeding competition, you know, it's going to make every other game have to get better. And while I don't really play Delta Force, and it probably will never be my main game, I'm not sure if I'll return to it, I was definitely cheesing the other day when I was checking the Steam charts, and I saw it had, I think, 90,000 players on, and it was maybe the 5th or 6th highest played game on Steam, and I was like, that is amazing. And that's what I was thinking months ago, even when I was kind of like, probably not going to keep playing this game. But I wanted it to drive Battlefield. I wanted Battlefield to have a more direct competitor than even just like Call of Duty or Siege, you know, just another general shooter game, but a game that's basically kind of a shameless copy, whatever, you know, a Chinese copy of the game. But just to drive it and be like, look, if people don't have Battlefield 6, well, that's fine, they have Delta Force, and they will move on. And so now they are hard pressed to make a good game. And so overall, I hope Battlefield 6 kills Delta Force. No offense to Delta Force or the fans, I just hope to see a good Battlefield game. And yeah, guys, I plan on playing the beta and releasing some videos on it in the following weeks. So let's just hope it all turns out great. So thank you.